I wish I could get this in frame. It's a very cute little crocheted doggy blanket, but it's fine. I'm Jenny Fern, and welcome to my library. Today I just wanted to do a kind of a chill video where I sit down in a comfy chair and review this huge big stack of books, which encompasses everything since I first started revamping this channel. These are the physical books that I've read, and I have a handful that I only loaned from the library. So this is going to be a little bit of a time warp. I'm going to start with the most distantly read book first, go my way chronologically through my reading, and then we'll end with what I've read most recently. The first thing that I have is We Bought a Zoo by Benjamin Mee. I finished this June 19th. Was considering getting rid of this book. This used to be on my to-read shelf. I decided to read this because I was like, well, you know, I'm kind of tempted to get rid of this, but I'll give it a shot, see if I like it. I ended up liking this. I gave this a 4 out of 5. There's just something about the title, We Bought a Zoo, and the movie artwork that makes this seem like kind of like a cheap, silly book. I quite enjoyed it. I liked the writing. I liked the voice. Nonfiction story written by a man, Benjamin Mee, who decided to go and purchase a zoo with his family to bring it up to a higher standard, have it be like a functioning business. During that, his wife is sick with cancer, so that is an element of the story as well. It kind of ends with the opening of the zoo. And it did get me more interested in zoos. I quite like reading about animals, and this kind of scratched that itch. He's exceedingly British though, so if that's like something you're not interested in, or if that annoys you, just be warned, it is quite British. So after We Bought a Zoo, I read another book from my to-read shelf. This was a span of time where I was clearing off my to-read bookshelf. I was getting inspired by looking at all of these books as I was picking out books to get rid of. I started reading a bunch of them. So the next book that I read was Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And I have talked about this in my mid-year freakout tag. Non-fiction, but it's novelized non-fiction. So it reads a lot like fiction. It reads a lot like a novel, but it is based on real events, real people. This is based on a murder trial, which it just wasn't that evident when I first started reading the book that was what was going to go on here. It's set in Savannah, and you meet all of these eccentric people. The author really had like a good sense of like talking to people who were interesting and exploring like the setting around these people who were quite interesting. It took me a very long time to realize that this was a true story. I didn't want to read a true crime book. I have some moral opposition to reading stuff that basically capitalizing on the death of somebody. I'm not really interested in contributing to that. This was very well written, but when I did find out that it was nonfiction, I was kind of like, ugh, I don't know what to do about that. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I did feel a little bit conflicted. But yeah, it is quite good. Also, apparently there's a movie. I was thinking, oh, I could do a video where I watch movies of books that I've recently read. None of them are available for free on any of the streaming platforms that I have, so I would have to buy it. I didn't want to do that. Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. And I was also quite conflicted going into this. So I got this book when I was pretty young from a thrift store, and I held on to it because I was like, I don't know if I'm old enough to read this yet. The movie when I was younger was like such a phenomenon, like 2005 maybe. And then I just read it this year for the first time. Thought it was really well written, but I have like a lot of conflict about it. I gave it 3 stars And I stand by that. There was some strange choices made by this author to focus on certain things, and I just thought the balance of subject matter, it was only really one perspective, I guess. I don't know how to say this, but feel like somebody else should have written this book. And I did learn that the geisha who is acknowledged at the end of this book did not want to be named and has since come out with her own memoirs. She wanted to represent herself. It's fiction, it was researched, and there were interviews. And that geisha is Mineko Iwasaki. She felt that there were some portrayals in this that were not proper or accurate. I'm a little bit conflicted about this book, although it was very beautiful to read. There are some moments in this that are just quite upsetting, and I don't think that they were necessary at all. But I am happy that I've read it, and I am going to hang on to the copy. The next book that I read, I do not own, and it was The Birch Bark House by Louise Erdrich. I asked ChatGPT for recommendations for books that were similar to the Little House on the Prairie series, but told from a native perspective. This was one of the recommendations. I will confirm this book really was exactly what I asked for. It really is like Little House on the Prairie, but from the native perspective. And in that, it is really dark in themes. There is death and sickness. It is upsetting. There is some sickness in the Little House on the Prairie series. The older sister goes blind from sickness, but there isn't like a drawn out experience of sickness in the books, and it isn't critical to the story of that family. Whereas in this story, it is critical. And it is like heartbreaking. It's really upsetting. I did not read the book. I didn't feel capable of reading the book at the time, but it definitely was worth reading. The next book that I read was The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I was in such a weird mood when I was reading this book. I got this as an audiobook rental from my library. I was just really not in a great mindset to focus on this book. And I could tell that it was beautiful, and I could tell that I would love it, but at the moment that I was reading it, I wasn't connecting with it at all. So I think I'm going to have to read this again at a later date, and so I did not rate it. I finished reading that on July 3rd. Then I had to place this book in here somewhere. I accidentally forgot to log it, but I did finish reading A Yellow Raft in Blue Water by Michael Doris. And this was one that I was considering getting rid of in my book unhaul. I really didn't know what this was about, and the cover art I just wasn't really connected with. Then, in the course of making the video of unhauling books, I figured out what the plot summary was. It interested me, so I read it. It is about 3 generations of Native American women. There's a younger girl whose story is the beginning of this book. So it's told in 3 parts. I think the first part might be the longest, and the last part the shortest. So we start with the youngest generation first, then there's the story of her mother, and you get like an idea of how each generation acts, and you think like, wow, they seem really immature, or who is this mother to this child? First you're in the child's perspective, right? And then you read from the mother's perspective and you're like, wow, who is her mother, right? And then you read from the mother's perspective, and it really gives you a lot of insight into how these women have been affected by their own childhood and their own decisions, and how each decision that they make carries on and impacts the next generation. I haven't read that many stories that are like this, but I really quite enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. We have Fanny Flagg's Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. There is also a movie of this, which I have not watched. I finished reading this on July 7th. The feel of this book, it's like just such a good size. I had an impression of this book informed by nothing. This was a little bit confusing of a read, keeping the different people straight in my head. Like there was a kind of a large cast of characters, and I couldn't really tell exactly who everyone was. It does have this really nice structure where at the beginning it will tell you where you are, what date you're at, so you can try to keep things straight, but I did still find it a little bit difficult. It's a cute book. It's got a lot of character. I might get more out of it if I read it one more time, but I don't know if I'm gonna do that. Again, not exactly something that I would usually pick up. Weird, super weird spoiler. But there is like cannibalism in this, which is like very brushed over and very weird. It's like a really small part of the book, but like, isn't that wild? Hi, buddy. You gotta go poops? So yeah, I'll be honest, it was a little bit jarring that there was like straight up like cooking people in that book. It was interesting after reading Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which is set in Savannah, Georgia, and then also reading Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, which is set in Alabama. You know, it's kind of interesting reading two books that are set in the South when I usually don't read books that are set in the South. So yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I had been going through a little bit of a phase where I wanted to read a bunch of John Green books, and I thought I might as well also put a hold on a Hank Green book. So I put a hold on this, and I've heard good things about this before, so I thought I might enjoy it. It's like supposed to be a little sci-fi. I was like, okay, I love sci-fi. I read this on July 8th. It was such a consumable book. It was very fast-paced for me. I found it quite entertaining, although it was like really kind of strangely structured. The character is unlikable. It's a bit of a weird one. It's a lot about like instantly famous person, and also like, you know, what is the meaning for human existence kind of thing. It was doing a lot, and I thought it was all right. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Children of the Whales Volume 1. This is a manga by Abi Umeda. I gave this 3 stars. I'm definitely interested in it. I really like the art. The story is just a little bit weird right now. It was good enough to get through the first volume, so it's pretty good. I read Paper Towns by John Green. This was a library rental. All of these have been library rentals. That's why I don't have a physical copy. Paper Towns was okay. This was the 3rd John Green book that I've read this year. I also read An Abundance of Catherines, which I gave 3 stars, and Turtles All the Way Down, which I gave 4 stars. Paper Towns was okay. It's a YA book. There's a guy who falls for a really eccentric girl, like a manic pixie dream girl kind of thing, but it really dives into like his perception of her, really colors who she is, who she might actually be, and what she's going through because she disappears. And he's trying to like figure out where she is, and then there's like a road trip. The road trip really was a slog for me. That I really got lost in there. There were some bits basically when they were like going to prom and stuff where I was like, really, come on, speed through this. I'm so bored. So there was some really boring bits, and that's why I gave it a 3 star. It was fine, but not the best. I also read the Lady Bird book of Garden Birds, and that was July 16th. So I got this little book from the thrift store. It's just a cute little pocket guide of birds, and it's really, really short, but I did read it all the way through, and I got some inspiration for my novel from that. So that was a nice experience. Oops. I just clicked on a goop ad. There's no way. This is crazy. I can't believe I've just so recently read this book. I read The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor, and I read this while feverish. I was quite sick. I had this as an audiobook rental. I just bought this because I loved it so much. I got this as an audiobook rental from my library. I had such a great time with it. This was anticipated for me to be a great read. I thought it was going to be really good. I was really excited about it. I had it on hold for a really long time. It is about a woman who is studying octopus, and she is an expert in that field, and she goes to an island where they think that they've found an octopus species that has a culture and an intelligence with, like, you know, language and stuff akin to that of humans. So they're trying to, like, figure out how to communicate with them and talk about what this means for people and explore ideas of, you know, consciousness and life and culture and language. And I love all of that. That's like some of my favorite stuff in science fiction. And I also find the ocean to be so fascinating. So this was an excellent book for me. I would love to reread it very soon because I was in such a feverish state that I couldn't fully understand what was going on all the time, but I fully enjoyed what I could understand when I was reading it. There's also like an AI life form, which is really interesting. If you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, like explorations of like, what does it mean to be like a person or to have intelligence, to have a culture, I would really recommend this. Louis trying to steal my wrist brace. When I was still sick, but I was feeling a little bit better, I read The Ways of a Mud Dauber, which is a book that I do own, but I have loaned it to a friend. Did I mention 5 stars for this one? And the Little Bird book, I didn't rate this because it doesn't really seem like something that I should rate. The Ways of a Mud Dauber, 5 star. Probably the best book that I read all year. This is a nonfiction piece. I think I've already talked about it on this channel, but I can't remember where. And it is about mud dauber wasps. Wasps that make their nests in little mud caves, and they lay their egg in there. The egg eats these little like petrified spiders, grows, and turns into a wasp. And there is some really interesting scientific research done by the author, who is a professor at Stanford in the 1940s. I loved it. He develops this friendship with this wasp, and it's just a really beautiful book. I loved it. I loved it so much. If more books could be like that book, I would be so happy. Really wonderfully written scientific nonfiction that also has some heart to it. Cream of the crop. While I was still sick, I was only sick for like 3 or 4 days, but you can read a lot when you're just in bed all day. So I finished this on July 21st, and that is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I picked this up also at a thrift store. I loved this. It is a short little book. It's a little novella. This is about an old man in Cuba who has a relationship with a younger boy who helps with fishing. This younger boy has gone out to help other fishermen because the old man is on like a dry spell. He's not been catching fish. So the old man is kind of somewhat abandoned by the boy, although the boy still does take care of him in the evenings. He makes sure he's fed, that he has water, that he has like a place to sleep. He takes care of him. And then in the morning, the old man goes out to fish. He ends up catching a gigantic fish that tows him way out into the ocean. It's such a thought-provoking little novella, and it's really beautifully written. I thought this was excellent. I gave that 5 stars. Then I read Children of the Whales Volume 2. Again, little manga series. It's okay, I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Open Throat by Henry Hoke, which is a very short novel from the perspective of a mountain lion living in LA. I really liked it. I thought the writing was really good. It was quite interesting. I think I would like to own this book. I have not ordered it yet. I gave it 4 stars. Go for it. Super short. And then I finished reading Live from Death Row. This one took me a little bit of a while. I finished this on July 24th. This is written by a man who was on death row. He was convicted of like killing a cop, basically. He goes through some of the details of that case in the very last section of the book. The book is organized into 3 sections. Part 1 is about living on death row. Part 2 is about crime and punishment, so that's all about like the prison system And part 3 is Musing, Memories, and Prophecies, which is really just him talking about whatever he wants to talk about. A lot of it is like the politics of that era, or that time period, which I think is the 90s. Yeah, this was copywritten in 1995. There is some discussion of politics at that time, some historical politics, like stuff about the Black Panther Party and stuff like that. Overall, I did enjoy this. I really liked the conversations about living on death row and the justice system. I got a little bit less connected when it was just about his thoughts on general topics of the day. They are all related to the idea of prison and the justice system and all of that, so I understand why they're in this book. I just didn't feel that connected with them, but it was quite good. This is the 4th book that I've read written by a prisoner. I've been going through, I think I bought 10 books that were written by prisoners this year. So this is one of them, and I will not rate it, but I do recommend that you read it. I recommend that anybody read about the experience of prisoners if you can. I read The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Amy Bender. I loved this. I thought this was deceptively simply written. It is such a complicated little story. There are so many relationships to unravel. You can really go into it with your own thoughts. This was recommended by ChatGPT to me. I think I was asking for one of the book recommendations asked by somebody in the comments, and this was one of the books that I discussed from that. So I thought I'd check it out. It was not what I was expecting. It's about a girl who can taste the emotions of the person who prepared her meal. That causes all sorts of problems for her. So she's just a normal kid with this strange ability. She talks about her family dynamics. I would love to do a full video about this book because I did see on Goodreads that this has quite a low rating, and there are a lot of people who rate it very lowly and really don't like the book. So I'd love to go into, maybe read this again, annotate it, and go into more depth on why I think this is such a good book. Because I really do think, like, technically this is quite a good book. I give it 5 stars. I read The Giraffe, the Pelly, and Me. This is by Roald Dahl. I read this on July 26th. It's just a little kid's book. It's very, very short, even for a Roald Dahl book. It's just for kids. This is not a book that you read as an adult. I wasn't sure that it was going to be like that, but it's got like little songs and silly little jokes in it. It was cute. Nothing really to recommend. I think if you have a kid, this might be a fun book, but otherwise, it doesn't really do anything for an adult. That's it. I've had this book for a long time though, and I finally read it. I did not rate it because it's just not for me. Then I read The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. I put this on my list because I saw it in a video of somebody I subscribe to. I'll put her information here. And she recently hauled this book. And I was like, oh my god, another octopus book? I just devoured and absolutely adored The Mountain and the Sea. And I'd previously read the nonfiction work Other Minds about how octopuses think. So I thought, wow, The Soul of an Octopus sounds great. It's nonfiction about octopus. I thought it was going to be great. I got maybe like 20% through this book, a few hours through this book. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I was just not connecting. It was not the style of nonfiction that I wanted. Something that I loved about The Mountain and the Sea were these little blurbs that are taken from one of the characters' books that she has written about like the minds of octopus and the culture of octopus, and like what if they developed a culture, right? And I thought those were so fun, very Solaris-y, and I really enjoyed them. Although I've seen reviews of people who thought that that was like the worst part of the book, right? I'm like, this is exactly for me. I love it. I wish this book was written like that. It was not. It was written very conversational, and to me it just didn't seem to have, ironically, that much soul. And I know that that's probably a me problem. It just didn't speak to me. It was not the right book for me. I thought I'd just finish it, I'd get through it. I'm like, well, I'm listening to audiobook, I'm listening at 2x. I can just get through it, right? I'll be honest, once I realized I didn't like it for the whole rest of it. It never picked up. I never liked it. I never liked this book. I gave it 2 stars because I really didn't enjoy it, and I really wanted to, and I love learning about octopus, so theoretically I should love this book. There were these like, oh, we're supposed to like get to know the people who work in this aquarium, and like you like in theory like know their names and stuff, and like you know quite a lot about them, but I never felt connected to any of them. There's like these emotional moments and they just didn't hit for me. I'm like mad about how much I didn't like this book. Somebody might like this book. I know. Let's see what its rating is. It has a 3.92. That's quite a good rating. People are gonna like it. I just thought it was terrible. The most recent book that I've read. How long? I've been talking for so long. Holy shit. The most recent book I've read is And Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin. And this was a very short, I don't even know what to call it. What genre is this? This was, I think, also recommended. I don't know if the person even recommended it. I don't think they recommended it, but they were like, you might like this, by a person on YouTube that I watch. So I'll add that information here as well if I can find it. Yeah, I guess I can't really figure out how to say what the genre is, but I'll tell you the vibes that it gave me. It gave me Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro vibes, mixed with like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and like The Walking Dead. Is that a picture enough? It's basically about this guy who he's in treatment for having undergone this delusion. He basically thinks that they're in a zombie scenario. He thinks other people are out to kill him and eat him, and he's trying to defend himself. And then there are the other people who are just normal people who aren't affected by this narrative. So it's a really interesting exploration into what is reality. The sentence, and then I woke up. I thought that I'd seen the world properly, but I didn't. And I thought it was quite good. I liked it. It was really short. I gave it 4 stars, I believe. That is it. This was way longer than I thought it was going to be. But that is everything for about a month and a half, I think, that I've read. That was great. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's not absolute hell to edit. Yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books, if you loved any of them, or if you hated any of them. If you want to read any of them, let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk about them. Thank you so much for watching. It's dark now. I hope you had a good one. See you soon. Bye.